A staffer for a GOP North Carolina Senator, Thom Tillis, effectively told one of their constituents to kick rocks after she called to share her concerns about losing health insurance as a result of her husband being furloughed. Now, Veals is the name of the constituent who called. She's from Carolina Beach, a 3-time cancer survivor. She called her senator out of fear that her health insurance was at risk. She had previously faced medical bankruptcy and difficulty accessing care, and her husband was furloughed because of the pandemic. She wanted assurance that she'd have coverage if she lost her health insurance, okay? Very common thing that Americans are concerned about right now. Makes a lot of sense that you would hit up a representative, hit up a member of Congress, hit up your senator, and see if there is any solution to prevent the loss of your healthcare coverage. Well, here's the kind of response she received from Thom Tillis' staffer.
Saying that if you can't afford it, you don't get to have it, and that includes healthcare.
Yeah, just like if I want to go to the store and buy a new dress shirt, if I can't afford that dress shirt, I don't get to get it.
But healthcare is something that people need, especially if they have cancer.
Well, you got to find a way to get it.
Well, you just got to find a way to get it. The staffer compared healthcare, something that you need to stay alive, to buying a dress shirt, buying something that you don't necessarily need to stay alive. But this is like a common ideology among members of Congress. Nando, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
My immediate reaction is obviously this is horrifying. It's a horrifying thing to say to someone. But what this staffer did is that he committed the biggest sin you can in American politics, which is tell your constituents the truth, because that's what this person did. I mean, this idea that you can only get proper health care if you can afford it is the ideology that pervades the U.S. Congress on both sides of the aisle. You know, that this was evidenced by the fact that, you know, the Democrats blocked any attempt to put Medicare for all, even in the platform. So if you have any employer-tied insurance system, you're gonna have people who are uninsured at some point. Those people will not be able to get health care because they won't be able to afford it. So this is just the truth of American politics, and the truth of the system is that if you can't afford care, you won't get quality care. That's just the reality of it. So yeah, you know, usually politicians have better sense than to tell the rubes the truth. They usually lie to them. They usually say all kinds of weird things about like, no, if you just do the proper thing, you'll get like access to healthcare or something like that. But the reality is that tens of thousands of people die every year because they don't get healthcare they need because they can't afford it, and tens of millions of people in the United States are uninsured. So yeah, this staffer is punished for speaking the truth.
Yeah, I think that you make a great point, because the top issue that ends up making headlines and getting staffers or members of Congress in trouble is when they demonstrate just how callous they really are. When they expose the real thoughts and ideology behind the policy decisions that they make. And you're right in pointing out that this is a problem on both sides of the aisle. I mean, right now, during this pandemic, now more than ever, it's so clear that the American people were lied to whenever we heard the same argument over and over again against a single payer healthcare system, against Medicare for all. This notion of, well, if you have single payer healthcare, you don't have choices. Okay, but right now, Americans don't have choices. In fact, before the pandemic, Americans had no choice. In most cases, unless you were unbelievably independently wealthy, you had to rely on your employer to provide healthcare, right? And do you get to decide? Do you have any say in what type of healthcare provider your employer signs on to? Of course you don't. Yeah. Do you have any say on whether or not the board decides to cut some of the money that goes toward the employee healthcare programs? No, you have no say over that. And you also have no say over what happens to you in your healthcare after you get laid off during a pandemic. I mean, we already knew that people didn't actually have choices, but I think that this pandemic certainly amplifies what progressives, what people on the left have been trying to scream from the rooftops. What blows my mind is that there hasn't been any progress in pressuring the Democratic Party to move in a direction that makes a lot more sense. In fact, if you look at the general election, you look at Biden and Trump is effectively pushing Biden further to the right on a number of issues. I just watched an interview with Biden where he started attacking Trump over how soft he is on China. And I was like, what? It was just strange. Yeah,
no, I remember the line that, single payer healthcare didn't save Italy from having problems during the pandemic, like just the most cynical argument you can ever imagine. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I wonder what this guy Tillis, what he would want his staffer to tell a constituent that is telling them that, like what is the company line when someone says like I have cancer, I don't have healthcare, what do I do? Like what should have the staffer said? I really don't understand because the Republicans like obviously don't have, they don't even know how to lie about these things.
I know what the answer is. It's easy. What? Obama did this. It's Obama's fault.
Right, it's Obama's fault.
Yeah, I mean it would be about Obama. Somehow they would twist it into an Obama issue. But speaking of which, there was a response from Tillis's office. They released an official statement kind of apologizing. And so let me read you what it said. The way Mrs. Veals was talked to by a staff assistant in our Washington office was completely inappropriate and violates the code of conduct Senator Tillis has for his staff, which is why immediate disciplinary action has been taken. We don't know what that disciplinary action is. My read of this is that the staffer is still employed and maybe there was some sort of, talking down to, I have no idea. But the problem here isn't necessarily the rhetoric or the tone used by the staffer. That callous nature of the call was more about what the ideology behind it is, right? Like the ideology of like, no, healthcare is a commodity. What are you talking about? If you can't afford it, then I don't know, figure it out. That's the issue here. And then real
I buy my Books Brothers shirts, like everybody else. You just got to pony up the cash, baby.
Jeez. And in terms of the Affordable Care Act and where Republicans stand on healthcare, sure, they're definitely worse than Democrats are. For instance, the Trump administration, as some of you might already know, is currently arguing that the Supreme Court should overturn all of Obamacare, throwing millions of people off their insurance and invalidating protections for pre-existing conditions, along with other provisions that protect patients. And as you guys know, I mean, the Affordable Care Act certainly has its issues, but there were important protections baked into that legislation that I would hate to see gone, because people with pre-existing conditions would find themselves in the same situation as they did pre-2008. They'd get rejected by healthcare providers, and it would be even more of a nightmare than what we're experiencing now. And let me also remind you that North Carolina is one of the 12 states in the United States that has not adopted Medicaid expansion, a policy that would help cover people like Veals if they lost their insurance. Tillis opposes Medicaid expansion. And under the Affordable Care Act, basically the federal government gives states money, like, hey, here's some money to expand your Medicaid program so more people can qualify if they don't have health insurance. And so, yeah, a bunch of red states, 12 of them have denied that federal funding.
Yeah, and the Medicaid expansion was the best part about Obamacare, right? It was the one that helped, that actually provided relief for millions of people. The fact that so many states have rejected the Medicaid expansion is just pure ideology, because usually states would love to accept federal funding with no strings attached, which is what the Medicaid expansion was. But that is just pure ideology in its purest form.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.